Hello, Khan. Nice to see you all here. Hope you enjoyed this conference so far. The talks, the city, the weather, everything has been super nice so far. So we wanted to kick off this afternoon session with the discussion on the off-chain blockchain infrastructure, like block explorers that sit in off-chain and powering the vast EVM network of chains and rollups, and how it can adapt to the new uh, narrative of superchains, cross-chain interop, new standards being proposed for addressing the different problems that arise in this hugely growing space of the new networks. So Blockscout is probably the only one fully featured blockchain explorer for the EVM networks that powers this vast decentralized network of chains as a free open source alternative to existing proprietary solutions. The Blockscout is fully open source, modular, customizable, modifiable. You can fork it, deploy it, and use it however you like for free without paying any license fees. It's fully EVM compatible and supports different layer ones, rollups, and any EVM compatible chains. And it provides different toolset features for different parties, and it's fully multi-purpose. It provides something both for users, for developers, for regular and power users, for API consumers. Soon it will provide the MCP server for AI agents, for dApps, and so much more. And today the Blockscout is proudly powering a huge network of more than 2,000 chains. So the main piece of infrastructure we have for Blockscout is the UI that we provide for each and every one of those networks. And some of those UIs have been hosted by us on our own domain. Some of them have been operated by other partners, third-party providers, rollup as a service providers, and so on. And some of them, especially for smaller chains, have been fully self-hosted for free by the teams themselves, by the chains, by independent parties, researchers, and so on. So Blockscout provides this powerful platform for a single chain that provides a fully featured experience for exploring EVM chains, entities, transaction blocks, and token transfers, and anything you would expect the typical block explorer to have these days. We also recently launched the initiative called Autoscout, basically, which allows you to deploy a production-ready Blockscout instance for any chain where the single requirement is the speed of the deployment, and you want to get the fully featured block explorer as fast as possible. So through Autoscout, it's possible to launch a production-ready Blockscout instance for any chain in just 5 minutes, and basically the only thing you need is an archive RPC endpoint, and then a few layout configurations for the UI if you want to do some basic customizations with your instance. So this makes it an ideal solution for all of the service providers and is already used by many of them, but can be also used by the independent parties and single people, individuals and researchers. So we have this vast network of Blockscout instances and chains, and we have an individual Blockscout explorer for each and every one of them. But not only in block explorers, but in general in the ecosystem, when we have so many chains, the problem that arises with this number of chains is the one we call interoperability problem. So it comes in a different aspects of it, but basically the main problem we have with interoperability is that it leads to the fragmented UX. Users are tired and it's hard for them to manage different wallets, gas tokens, interfaces for different chains, switching networks, and just remember where the transactions are going through, where they put their funds onto, and so on. Then it also impacts the security because dApps and protocols developing on one chain do not have easily defined and uniform way to send different cross-chain messages. There is no single interface that shares the same security properties. So if they want to communicate and build cross-chain dApps that communicate with some other smart contracts on other networks, there is no single uniform way how they can do that provides the single and the shared security assumptions with the Ethereum itself. So there is inconsistent standards, the application logic gets siloed to one ecosystem only without this easy way to communicate with the entire EVM space. There are security trade-offs, and it's just hard to track all of this together, to index everything, and to keep track of all of these things. In Blockscout, the main issue we have with the interoperability you might think of is the fragmented UX. So as I told, we already have this single instances for each network that power and index each individual blockchain. And yeah, in some sense, these instances do not interact with each other in any way, and that makes it hard for users to use them and to make sense of all the cross-chain activity, if they're heavy moving from one chain to another, if they're interacting with different dApps and use different chains and ecosystem and migrate back and forth. So overall, in the Ethereum vision, the proposed solution to this interoperability problem was that we have to find a way to make the seamless UX across all the different rollups and chains that doesn't introduce these inefficiencies and redundant barriers. And basically the idea is that we should find a way to make this cross-all to interop invisible at the application layer and just let users use whatever dApps they like without actually thinking which chains they've been settled on, what's going on and where these transactions have been sent to, what bridges have been used, and how this all comes together. And the way they propose to do that is through certain standardization and unification by introducing different standards and how this all can be put together. So far, the Ethereum space, probably one of the main entities has been driving all of these efforts was the L2 working group. So basically what we have there is that we have a bunch of different ERC standards for different of the problems I've described before. So there are a few standards that try to address this chain-specific addresses, and basically to find a way how you can define and give a precise definition on where you want to send your money to or where the person's user account is exactly located by providing and combining this tuple of user address and the chain there on in a single string. And there are different standards for putting the strings together, both in the machine-readable format for smart contracts and data indexers, and then also provide them in a human-readable format that's easier to understand by humans, by wallets, by AI agents, and so on. Then there is also a couple of standards for moving the on-chain registration of chain IDs from the GitHub whitelisted repositories that requires manual approval and takes time on-chain through the digital identities such as ENS. And then there are a bunch of different standards being proposed and tested and rolled out for the interop and cross-chain communication between the rollups networks. So one of the main efforts there has been the OP interop. And then there are a couple of other interesting standards like the open intents framework, the cross-chain intents, and the similar one being designed by the Arbitrum in the form of universal intent engine. So when it comes back to Blockscout, basically with all the standards and cross-chain interoperability, the question we might ask ourselves is that, is it possible to just get rid of this single instance, Blockscout instances altogether and put everything in a single UI and just provide a single search string and a single interface that will list all the transactions across different chains, all the tokens, and display everything under one UI? So, and actually this approach is what we already tried, and you can go and try it on blockscout.com. It already works in its first version, and it already provides a bunch of benefits that are clearly visible to us. So it provides this single Ethereum entry point to the entire EVM ecosystem and allows you to easily search and access all the data from the single domain, from the single interface, from the single UI. It provides a simple API gateway for the developers, for the indexers that are using Blockscout API. And then actually this single UI is much easier to use for regular people, for agents. It also comes in the form of the MCP. It's much easier to them to figure out the blockchain space without using multiple different UIs. But at the same time, when we are talking about open source products, it's really hard to put everything together under a centralized domain because it also introduces a bunch of different risks and problems with it. And it's probably not a big deal if you're already closed source solution. If you're running a closed source block explorer, then it really is not a problem, any of this, and you can just combine all your domains together and put everything in a single space. But we are building open source product. And for us, if you try to get rid of the single Blockscout instances and put everything together, then We are very concerned about this centralization risk, about the data ownership risk, that every data would be owned by the single party, and yeah, it wouldn't make sense to continue building this as a fully open source product that can be run by anyone. And then one of the most important here as well is the lack of flexibility, is that if you try to put all the chains together in the single UI, you of course introduce a lot of benefits, but at the same time, each chain then would lose this unique flavor they have already. Some chains prefer to have different customizations, not only on the UI format and UI layout they want to see in the Block Explorer, but even in depth in certain transactions, some chains are different from each other and provide unique features in some transaction types, maybe data types, and provide some aspects that they want to showcase in the Block Explorer itself that just wouldn't be possible to put in a single centralized UI for the multi-chain. So the proposed solution from the Blockscout side that we believe is the right way to build an open source multi-chain Block Explorer is that we want to keep this network of single core, single chain instances as a core that are still open source, that are still available across the entire ecosystem, can be hosted by anyone, not only by us or centralized providers, but by the people out there themselves. It's modular and flexible, and pretty much everything people already love about Blockscout stays there. But then on top of this layer, we just built additional layers for supporting these multi-chain features, L2 clusters, for showcasing different interop features between the networks and between the ecosystems themselves. We built the layer that provides this unified search across all the connected EVMs. And then we also might provide an entry point for universal dApps that provide some capabilities for the users that should be accessible regardless of the chain they're using, such as swaps, bridges, payments, and stuff like that. The single entry point should provide these capabilities as well. And then we also try to move some chain agnostic data to some shared spaces that basically the data space pieces that are not as critical as the whole index blockchain, but stuff like name tags, metadata, ENS domains and ENS compatible alternatives, verified contracts that we are trying to push to the Verifier Alliance initiative. Then for the metadata, there is also an interesting open labels approach. And then we might move all the dApps registry to the single space that can be accessed by the decentralized frontends. So to showcase what we have built already and what currently is being developed at Blockscout stage, is one of the efforts we are currently building is related to the OP Superchain interop. Basically, the OP interop idea is that they want to combine certain superchain networks in a single cluster that feel more like a single chain than separate chains. And they have a bunch of unique features that are specifically designed to work in this L2 interop cluster. So they have token addresses that are interoperable with each other across the chains. They have the same address. They can be easily and fast bridged between the chains seamlessly. And so it makes sense to combine these token addresses together to aggregate the balances and show it in a single UI, since all of these tokens share the same metadata, the same name, the same address, the same security properties. And then OP Superchain also allows this fast and cross-chain L2 messages for generic application. It allows you to build interoperable apps and so on. And so at Blockscout, we try to build this extra layer on top of the existing single instance Blockscout explorers for the interop specifically that will precisely showcase this aggregated balance, interop messages, cross-chain transactions, their statuses, but at the same time, beneath it, it will still rely on the data provided by the single instance Blockscout explorers. And then some other interesting interop efforts we have is related with non-EVM blockchains. So even though we don't provide any indexing solutions for non-EVM blockchains directly, we do not have any explorers for non-EVM networks. In some cases, we are still able to fetch some data from them and to display the crosslinks, maybe combine some data from the third-party APIs and put it in Blockscout. And this way, we can also achieve interop with other ecosystems, even though we do not provide the indexing solutions for them ourselves. So one of the examples here is for Neon EVM. We are able to link together Solana and EVM transactions that wrap in the Neon EVM transactions in the Blockscout UI. And then one of the most recent examples was with the TAG chain, Ton application chain, where we combine a bunch of Ton transactions that are coming in parallel asynchronously by the specially developed indexer and Blockscout, and we combine them together, and we are able to show them in a single Blockscout interface and basically show the users and developers through all of the stages of the transaction, how it was split and combined back together, and really show this interop between the EVM and the Ton ecosystem. So yeah, let's summarize what are the implications for the interop for such essential pieces of infrastructure such as block explorers or wallets are. So we definitely see that this cross-chain, cross-L2 transaction and cross-chain transaction are becoming the new norm and are becoming more and more popular by the day. And it's really becomes a must to have this visibility for them in any dApp, in any wallet, in any block explorer. So we are trying to approach that as well. Then there are some emerging data and data types and data standards for interoperable addresses, intents, cross-chain transactions that should be supported in such off-chain indexers and off-chain pieces of infrastructure, such block explorers. And then also, as a side note, we definitely can observe that with the arrival of this intense account abstraction and interop transaction, they definitely start to produce much more complex transactions that we have seen before with different dApps. Basically, each transaction now wraps a bunch of different meta transactions in it. It can contain some cross-chain logic, and the block explorers and other off-chain pieces should adapt accordingly and abstract such complexities away and find a way to display this data as simply as possible and as easy to understand for the end user as they can. That was pretty much it. So thank you very much. And I think we have a couple of minutes for questions, if we have any.
Hi, I work for a company. We have an L1 blockchain, but we have multiple chains, and we've actually used Blockscout as our chain explorer, but we've got, for instance, 5 EVM chains, and we've got things running in, for each chain, we've got stuff running in Docker Compose, but for each chain, there's like 5 different Docker containers that we have to run, and I think we started building this in April, so I don't know if this is a new version and something that maybe we could move to, or is this version probably the same one that we have and maybe we're just not using it right?
Are you talking about Cadena, right?
Yes.
Yes, so I already noted down for myself, I've attended your presentation, and we definitely should catch up after the talk to see the way how we can coordinate together. But yeah, there is definitely some improvements to be made.
Okay.
For
I'll come and see you.
See you. One more question over there.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Just to understand, today's new efforts that you're building, will this also be open source as well, or is this going to be a new closed source product that you've introduced?
Yeah, we'll try to keep it as open source as possible. There is no benefit for us to keep such important pieces as closed source, but yeah, so all of these things should be open source as the rest of the Blockscout stack. Okay, thank you.